everyone. This is my very first ever creepypasta narration, so hopefully you guys like it, and if this does well, then we might do more in the future. So grab a drink, grab a snack, and enjoy the show. I'm the new night janitor at a haunted house. Where the heck is my list of rules? It's more a murder house than anything else. But that doesn't change the fact that it is haunted. And I'm the new janitor. I think I might be screwed. I wouldn't strike you as the type of person to become a janitor. For one thing, I'm a girl. When you think janitor, you probably picture a middle-aged white dude with a bad hairline. Like that guy from the Breakfast Club who wanted to be John Lennon when he grew up. You wouldn't figure me for the custodial arts. A slight girl with oddly pale skin and messy black hair, and fresh out of college with a creative writing degree in my pocket, which by the way is worth about as much as the paper it's printed on. But here I am, Amy Enos, 24, janitor. It's my fault for thinking all slightly creepy jobs that shouldn't exist come with a list of rules, things like that. Avoid the stairs past midnight, and whatever you do, don't bargain with the blind milkman. I'm not sure how long I'll last, and after last night, it's no huge surprise that the previous janitor quit so abruptly. I doubt if he made it through the full cycle. I doubt if I will. I've only been at this job for one night and I'm already considering leaving, but I can't. As much as I want to, I just can't. You'll find out soon. And in the meantime, I figure I better start making a list of my own. Because if I don't make a list of rules, who the hell else will? I should start with the house, which you'll know about if you visit a little town that lives between the Redwoods and San Francisco. The town itself is unremarkable, a sort of suburban fever dream in near spitting distance of the ocean. The surfing's okay, not that I know, but otherwise it's a total dead end, an American gutter just past the big city. The only reason we haven't been flattened by condos or some apocalyptic waste factory is because we're the town with a haunted house to our name. Who in their right mind would bulldoze that? Someone who's never seen The Shining, I guess. But even then, I think the most secular of deniers can sense something's wrong here. Like, this place is a thing forgotten to rot in the back of the fridge, and now the air, smelling faintly of corruption, is slimy and dreadful and leaves you feeling uneasy without an answer as to why. I never believed in evil, not even when I moved here after school and first heard about what happened in the haunted house, the one that looked like a scaled-down Winchester house, an architectural mess that couldn't quite decide if it wanted to be a Victorian or otherwise. The haunted house, which I'll call Victorian for my sake, sat on the outskirts of town, at the end of a long, winding drive which carved through a landscape colored by sprawling lawns and dense copses, all of which belonged in a Wyeth painting. It was built by some well-to-do businessman a gazillion years ago. A palace that would be passed down through generations. Now it's a tourist trap, so much for posterity. When you reached the house, expecting some hulking monstrosity, you were inevitably disappointed. It was homey and quaint. It looked like something out of a snow globe, which they sold in the gift shop, I might add, along with scratchy shirts that I read "I survived the Crestmont murder house" and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. That's not to say the house was small. It was a 3-story mansion wrapped in a landing strip of a porch, its countless eaves and gables and spires framed by manicured hedgerows, which I very much doubt had been here since the house's inception in the early 1900s. It didn't look haunted. Its paint, and almost blinding white and red, was unblemished and serviced yearly. Same goes for the grounds, which looked like a high-end golf course circa 1950. The reason the haunted house was kept so pristine, besides its historical relevance and its wicked grant from the city, was because they did daily tours, flaunting to tourists the homebred tragedy that made our town famous. You could feel it, I'll say that much. I never believed in ghosts and ghouls and things that go bump in the night, but that house seemed to be pulsing with dark history. a living, breathing thing that hoarded awful knowledge and boiled into tragedy. And yet, when I saw the ad in the classifieds, the one that said, "Searching for a night janitor, $25 an hour," I called it with my reference and said, "Why yes, I can start tonight." That was yesterday. The day my inheritance finally ran out. Okay, well, not quite, but it was close to running out, and it was time to find a job. A real job. Look how far that got me. I'm living the American fucking dream. Yay. At least now I know the first rule. I doubt if it'll help me much at this point, but this survival guide isn't for me, is it? This is for the ones who find themselves working the night shift at a haunted house. And if that's you, you need to listen closely. This might be life or death. The first rule: avoid the black door at all costs. The first rule should really be avoid the locked door at all costs. But it wasn't always locked, and it moved around, so I figured this might make more sense. I got there just before sunset for my first night on the job. The groundskeeper showed me around, told me what to clean, dust, and what not. He was a character right out of a Stephen King novel, frail and whiskered, and approximately 200 years old, his voice like a clatter of a rattlesnake who smoked unfiltered reds and drank homemade moonshine to boot. The inside of the house is much like the out, a historical mess crumbling under its own history. The furniture, decorating them all relics of the olden days. Little plaques prompted morsels of information about the countless tragedies that had plagued the house, beginning with the death of 2 migrant workers during its construction, and ended with a family annihilation in the late 80s. Despite its size, there wasn't much to clean. Most of the rooms were pristine and needed only a light dusting. I guess that's why they hired one person and not a small army. Halfway through the tour, the groundskeeper stopped me in the kitchen. It was approximately twice the size of my apartment, a sprawling tapestry of tiles and ancient appliances. "Ah," he started, his voice husky and raw. "You know about this place?" I frowned, confused. Of course I knew about it, but that wasn't what he was asking. "I'm not sure," I replied. His eyes, like 2 bright animals living in wrinkled pouches of flesh, flickered about as he cleared his throat. "It's like a candle at night, this house is. It draws things, rips them out of the darkness like moths to a flame. It's a magnet, girl, a magnet that sucks all who thrive in shadow out into the light. But there is no light here, only lesser darkness." Was the creepy groundskeeper telling me to be careful? If that wasn't a blinking red neon sign screaming, "Get the fuck out," I don't know what is. But I needed this job. What did I say before about not believing the powers of Ouija, spiritual or otherwise? "I'll be okay," I told him. He stopped himself and wetted his lips. "I spend most nights in the little log shed on the edge of the woods. If you get spooked, come and find me." "Okay." He nodded curtly, and we continued on like nothing happened. Half an hour later, with the sky bleeding a sunset, the groundskeeper stalked off like a tired wolf towards a far-off cabin which sagged against a tree line. And suddenly I was alone. Well, that's not entirely true. This is the part where you start to hate me. I get it. I'm an idiot and a horrible person. Seriously, I am. I don't skin children or anything, but I'm the girl in the horror movie who runs upstairs instead of outside. My insipidity is why I'm in this mess. I waited a minute, then 2, and once I knew he was gone for certain, I crept around the side of the house to a patch of asphalt that was the parking lot. It was empty, but for my car, an ugly hybrid that looked like a giant white turd, still humming with electrical power as it piped gallons of cold air conditioning into my car. I could hear a low whining through the cracked windows as I crept up to the passenger seat. A hellhound leapt up into the glass. I chuckled and pulled open the door. My big, dumb golden retriever, Willy Wonka, spilled out onto the ground and immediately began sniffing and bouncing and looking at me because, gosh, isn't this so exciting? Why aren't you petting me? Please pet me. Yes, I brought my goddamn dog to the night shift. Before you start hating me, which you will, just let me explain for my sake. I have anxiety. It's manageable, mostly. Some days I can't leave the house. Others I can't leave my bed. Or maybe that's depression. I don't know. I've never gone to a doctor to find out for certain. They terrify the shit out of me. More than ghosts. And after last night, that's saying something. The point is, sometimes my own little private thunderstorm fills the air above my head and dumps an ocean of bad feelings over me. Wonka's helped me on those days, and maybe I could have gotten a service dog, but it wouldn't have been Wonka. He's far too dumb to figure out the doggy door, let alone complete school. So here I am, sneaking my dog into the night shift from hell. He was well behaved. He wouldn't shit on the floor or trip the upholstery, and just in case, I would tie him up in the kitchen. But I needed him. I could feel it digging at my gut like an insect, needling away at the walls of my tummy. A terrible premonition that I would need my dog. Turns out in the end, he would need me. 5 minutes later, I corked in my earbuds, threw on last podcast on the left, and with Henry Zabrowski wailing in my ears, got to work. It started in the living room, in which an intruder had slashed through a pack of sorority girls some 50-odd years ago, vacuuming beneath the large, tough sofas, dusting the above a fireplace you could live in, scrubbing down the windows before moving into the hallway, the reading room, and then eventually making my way upstairs. Outside, the evening light pulled away, slowly at first, then gaining speed like a rapid exodus of defeated soldiers, and a heavy darkness took its place, oppressive and black. The house had been sucked into a vacuum of space and now drifted through an interminable, inky nothingness. I was in the second-floor hallway, furthering away at a set of dagger-type photographs when I saw something move. My neck pricked with a goose flesh. All night I had felt eyes crawling over my back, but whenever I looked up, I found nothing. Spare old furniture in need of a dust-off. This was different. Something had moved, rippled like a curtain on the corner of my vision. I tugged out my earbuds and straightened up. I was staring down the dimly lit second-floor hallway at a black window pane. The roses on the wall around it seemed to wilt, shiver, and wither in the presence of whatever loomed just beyond. My heart jumped into my throat, hammering at the roof of my mouth. I was frozen. Dread, hot and sticky, seemed to trickle slowly down my legs and arms and turn them into tingling jelly. I stared at the black window pane from which the tap had issued. Now I was certain I had seen something move. Something pale and awful with dangling stick-like limbs that coiled up like a dead spider when it wasn't moving. I jumped and let out a little yelp. Then I laughed. I'd always laughed when I was nervous. But I wasn't nervous. I was terrified. My brain was white with fear, like a TV tuned to static, and I knew that whatever was tapping again and was doing it with a long knife-like fingernail, yellow and jagged and reeking of blood. The black window pane glided towards me. It was like a horrific vertigo zoom. The walls stretched back on either side of me as the window floated closer, carrying with it the awful thing that wanted to open my throat. Then I realized I was walking. Like a woman in a dream, my soul shuffled forward. The edges of my vision danced with static. The window, a crystalline anchor that was roping me in. My nerve endings were screaming with fear. My teeth ached. I felt hot pinpricks of pain exploding behind my eyes like spray from a shotgun. A horrible question danced at the front of my mind like a little angry leprechaun. What would happen when I reached the window? Would the thing explode through the glass and tear me out into the night? Would I keep on walking, right through the pane as the jagged glass clawed at my cheeks and hair like the monster's fingernails? I was at the window before I had an answer. My body stopped on some automated conveyor belt, and I stood there, staring out into the black chasm that blanketed the beyond. There was no moon or stars. I was staring out at nothing but a pale face, drawn and ragged with terror, sprung up into the glass like a horrible jack-in-the-box. I screamed and leapt back. Outside the window, the face leapt back with me. I moved closer, and my reflection did too. A relieved sigh hissed out of my nose like air from a punctured tire. I felt the weight of the world lift wondrously off my shoulders. My body seemed to uncoil, losing its tension. My shoulders slunk, my knees wavered, threatening to buckle. There was no monster. I was getting spooked, quite literally, by my own reflection. I chuckled humorlessly and brushed off the slimy cobwebs of unease that had wrapped my bones in the last minute of my life. I didn't stop to think about what might have made that tap, tap, tap. I told myself it was a naked branch needling the window like branches sometimes do. Outside the house, the wind picked up and went howling around its many angles like some hellish creature set loose. Inside, I broke the spell, taking out my feather duster in an attempt to sweep away the broken pieces of what just happened. I worked steadily, this time with no podcast to guide me, nothing but the screaming wind which reminded me so much of children dying in fire. Not much later, I found the black door. I was nearly done with the second floor. The third floor, as the groundskeeper had informed me, was an attic storage space. Praise Jesus that wasn't on my itinerary. My joints were aching from scrubbing and dusting and sweeping, and I couldn't wait to fall into my bed and tumble into a deep, black sleep. I was still shaken and unnerved, but I lied that off, attributing it to the pot of black coffee I'd brewed at the gift shop refreshment hub. Wonka was happy enough, sleeping soundly in the kitchen beside a water bowl I'd put out. I think about it now, as I write this. In books and movies, the dogs are always growling and yapping when spooky shit is about to hit the supernatural fan. But Wonka was silent as a church mouse. I hadn't heard a peep from him all night. After the incident, I'd wandered downstairs and buried my face in his soft scruff, soaking up the not unpleasant smell of a musty dog. He had lifted his head, lugubriously, looked at me with sad button eyes, saw there was no food, and returned his head to his paws. I sighed and trudged back upstairs to get this strange and unsettled night over with. It was beyond late, and I was ready to be done. The top of the house was much like the bottom, an odd assortment of rooms tied together by hallways and adjoining doors. When you hit the top of the stairs, you were met with a hallway that ran both ways. It was lined with closed rooms, side tables, ancient pictures of people long dead, and ended in 2 windows, one of which had given me the stupid fright. I stalked into the hallway, mind in the stars, towards where I'd left my bucket of supplies. I looked up absently and felt my stomach twist in on itself. I ground to a stop, staring stupidly at what couldn't be. My heart crashed into the wall of my ribs and left a low, hollow ache in the center of my chest. I felt a hot run of bile slowly creeping up my throat like battery acid. I tried to swallow it, but my mouth had gone dry. There was no window where there should have been. In its place stood a massive door, one coated with tar, still hot and sticky, and leaching off a thick, sour reek that stung my eyes and nose and flooded my belly like boiling water. A Sharpie line flowed steadily across the floor towards it, but I saw it wasn't Sharpie at all. A thick stream of spiders, trailing the length of the hall like a ribbon of black fur, flowed under the pitch-soaked door that stood at the end of the hall. I looked down and saw the line of spiders scurrying over the toes of my scuffed Converse sneakers like a steady river of tar. I jumped back with a cry of revulsion and felt the loathsome crunch of spiders crackling under my feet, a sickening sensation that made my skin crawl. This was wrong. It was all wrong. Things like this didn't happen in real life. They only happened in... Then I looked up. I felt my heart crash, thud, to a stop in my ribs. It was like a record on a turntable that had been killed with a needle still riding the groove. It scraped and grated against the walls of my chest cavity as I stared in raw, gaping horror at the black door which stood an inch from my nose. I stood at the end of the hall, and the door was directly in front of me. Or maybe I was directly in front of it. I could read the swirls and streaks in the gobs of tar from where an unsteady hand had haphazardly applied it. I could taste the fetid reek, foul and overwhelming. that radiated off it in hot waves. Cold brass dug into my palm. My hand was gripping the doorknob, gripping and turning it. I was paralyzed by a tingling fear that burned at my nerve endings and filled my brain band with white static. I wanted nothing more than to run from this place and never look back. But I also wanted to see the inside of that door. No, I had to. It was a feeling of raw, primal lust that overpowered everything else. I had to. I stood there on the second floor of the murder house, turning the handle in. It wouldn't turn. The door was locked. The spell shattered like a vase dropped from 2 stories. My entire body crawled with revulsion, so sudden and overwhelming that I thought I would faint. Skirt, skirt, skirt. I gasped back as something played at the inside of the door. I could hear the heavy, congested rasp of its breath as it went skirt, skirt, skirt. I staggered back and felt spiders crunch and snap under my feet, and I didn't care in the least. The door jumped in its frame as it was hammered from behind. It sounded like a cannon crack in the disgusting silence of the second floor hall. I yelped like a dog whose tail had been pulled and fell backwards, collapsing into a lurching, uneven run. I would have fallen flat on my face, crumpled into the sea of spiders if not for my massive, staggering strides. It was more falling than running, perpetually collapsing forward and catching myself with each footfall as the hallway blurred and the tar-drenched door pulled away. I hit the stairwell and whipped around the banister, and just as I did, a freight train barreled through my legs and flipped me ass over a tea kettle. For a fighting moment, I was weightless, and I could picture myself flipping over the banister and hitting the ground below, my neck snapping like a twig and ending Amy Enos, janitor, once and for all. But then I felt the comforting sturdiness of the balustrade beneath my palm, and I did a strange, dizzying pirouette before finding myself flat on my ass at the top of the stairs. Gulliver flashed past me and went galloping down the hall while I sat there stunned and useless. I think I could have grabbed him had I reacted, but in that split second of uncertainty, I hadn't considered what might have swept my legs from under me. Then I saw the flash of gold, and it hit me in the face like a closed fist. For the first time all night, I screamed. It wasn't his name, and even if it was, I doubt he would have stopped. This was a run of a dog chasing a squirrel, a tunnel vision dash where nothing else mattered, except my dog Willy Wonka. The clasp on his harness snapped. He wasn't chasing a squirrel. My dog was barreling towards the black door, which now stood partway open. Shadows pulled into the room, and etched into the vague darkness, I saw a horrible, broken thing. All elbows and kneecaps, its burned, blackened skin pulled taut over what looked to be nothing more than jagged wire hangers. The 2 glowing pinpricks of its eyes caught the light beneath the long, black hair drenched over its misshapen scalp like a dead spider. It looked like a woman. Maybe it was once long ago, but it hadn't been anything for a long time. Just another it that slithered through the darkness and hid in the corners of your vision while it sucked out your fear like marrow from bone. Its arms were splayed. I saw now that the universal gesture for
"Come here, you dumb, ugly dog, so I can tear the fur from your flesh while you scream." Oh yes, dogs do scream, and you'll scream while blood pours out, and I shred your doggy's eyes from their delicate holes, and then your throat, and then your tongue, and then...
I screamed. This time it was a word. It came from a deep place and vibrated up through my chest in a deafening bellow. No! Normally that wouldn't have stopped Wonka in his tracks and had him slinking back to me with his tail between his legs. But it didn't. It couldn't. His tail whisked in through the thresholds behind the rest of him, and I saw him disappear into the thing's grasp. Then the black door slammed shut, and for the second time that night, I found myself alone in the haunted house with no dog to make it all better. I told you you'd hate me. I hate me. I cried. It was all I had left to do. When I had staggered to my feet, drunk on exertion and fear, I looked up to find, no surprise, the black door missing, replaced by the window which should have been there all along. My dog was gone, the only thing keeping me sane, and it was my fault. That's when I collapsed. I crumpled in on myself and sobbed into the hardwood floor, tears warm and salty puzzling beneath me as I cried out my fear and pain and confusion. All I could do was cry. The rest of the night was a blur. Dawn slowly trickled in through the windows, and before I knew it was time to leave. Leave. That threw me down a whole new pitfall. I couldn't leave, but at the same time I had to. Soon the tour guides would be showing up with questions like why the hell had I brought my dog when pets were not allowed, and what did I mean the black dory had swallowed him. I couldn't lose this job, and sticking around meant probably losing it. I couldn't come back to this place. I couldn't. But I had to. It was a catch-22. If I lose my job, I can't save my dog. If I can't come back, I can't save my dog. I had to stick around. I had to come back. I had done a decent enough job on the cleanup before it all went to shit. They wouldn't be firing me for neglect. At least not yet. So I shuffled around in a daze, playing it through my mind a dozen different ways, probing for faults, of which there were many, before coming to terms with the facts of my situation. I would go home and sleep, if I could, and then come nightfall, I would wander back into the house. I would find the black door and save my dog. I would get in my car and drive until I ran out of gas, and then I'd refill the tank and drive some more. I was naive, and now I'm broken, and this plan is the only thing keeping me together. Evil is real, I know that now. I can feel my own private thunderstorm of guilt and regret gurgling and chuckling in the back of my mind, getting ready to descend with the fury of God. If I let that happen, I won't be able to save myself, let alone Wonka, who needs me more than I've ever needed him. It's time for me to leave for work. I don't even remember the drive home. It was like I blinked and found myself here. I tried to sleep, couldn't. Now it's time to leave. The sky is slowly darkening with a sunset, like some god is slowly easing down the lights on their celestial kingdom. All I can say is, wish me luck. If I make it through my second night shift at the haunted house, I'll update my survival guide. Because everyone knows, even me, that there's always a second rule after the first.